start. We have a quorum. And
Are you recording, Kevin?
It is recording.
the order, and we take the roll, please.
All right, David Lorman is not here. David Shaw,
Here.
Gurn, not here. Susan West,
Present.
Tom Berthal is not here. Nathan Jaron,
Present.
and Charles Myers.
Present.
Evelyn, hello. Nice.
Yes.
Come sit up here, then you can see the screen.
I smell like a fire, so I apologize in advance.
Oh, there we are. Hello.
Excellent.
I didn't pay attention to where the room was.
Well, I paid attention, but I didn't know where.
I saw the city council chambers were empty, they were dark, and I assumed it was, oh, it must be in the library.
Well, there's plan commission tonight. And I think no one is in community.
Oh,
So, appreciate your flexibility with the date
Yeah.
and the room choice, all the things. Thank
I
you.
missed seeing you this year on my own.
I know, it didn't work out. That's still all right.
Okay, the next item is acceptance of the minutes. Comments about them? But yes, it does a good job.
Was the spelling of my name corrected, Kevin?
So, I did, it's not gonna show up here, but I did, correct that in the version that's gonna show up on OnBase.
Okay,
So,
Important.
so I have that correction.
okay, that's the only,
That's the only thing you saw.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, then I get to say the minutes are accepted. Why did we stop voting on them?
More efficiency, but it's taking more time to go through why we're not voting on them than it did to vote on them.
We have to ask if there is.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, first agenda item is Prince of Pheasant Branch Conservancy Eagle Watch Day. And we have Paul.
All what is here from,
Would you like
Friends
to
of Pheasant Branch
explain
Conservancy.
Sure. We have a pair of eagles in Pheasant Branch Conservancy. We've had a pair there since 2019 when they began building a nest. And Kevin Munson and I often spend our afternoons watching the eagles. And Tim Hansel comes by, and we have a lot of people come up ask about them. Kevin, this is an amusing story. He put up a spotting scope on the platform, and I asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, I had it in my garage. I thought I just put it here." How many of us have a spotting scope in the garage like that one there? Anyway, he donated it. But an issue is that it's fairly tall. And many people coming by are kids or shorter people, and they can't really see it. So one afternoon last year, we just all brought our scopes and stuff, and we sat there and we let people look. And this year we thought we'd get a little more organized about it because it was very positively received. So we thought we'd bring it to the committee and make sure it was acceptable, that we set up an afternoon where Kevin has a tripod spotting scope. I have one. Tim Hansel has one. We have a bunch of binocs. We will set up there, and we'll advertise and invite people to come by, bring their kids, and see the eagles. And I think the important thing is for kids to see these wonderful birds out there doing their thing, but also for the public to realize that a place like the Conservancy is a treasure that serves as the home for many animals in our community. The Pheasant Branch Conservancy provides homes for a wide range of animals, but eagles are just a wonderful example of what can exist in a conservancy. So that's our goal. It's education, it's community building, It's opportunity for young people to see something different, and we hope you'll give us the okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I do too.
So, yeah. All for that.
People don't get to see eagles.
Hey,
We now have
and
them.
I'll note that the nest is 294 yards from the trail, because we brought our golf rangefinders out, and we can see where they are. And this will be a chance, you can see them with the naked eye, but not like we can project with our spotting scopes. So it'll be great for the kids to see. It's fun to watch kids go, wow. Not only that, but adults go, wow. So, and May 16th, we chose that date because the eaglet will be getting bigger then. And so it won't be able to hide down in the nest for most of the afternoon. We chose the afternoon because that's when the lighting is good, comes from the backside of you. And the eaglet should be active during that time, and so we'll really get to see it out there.
Discussion or motion?
I'll make a motion to approve having them hold this event on May 16th.
16.
16th, yes, 16th. In the afternoon.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yes.
And letting people realize that we've got rare, unique animals in this conservancy so close to people.
There's a reason it's a conservancy.
Yes.
We're really lucky that they chose that spot
Oh.
because it's
Oh, yeah.
So
it's separated enough, and now that we've got that trail access thing worked out, you've got it set up so people can see it as well as they could possibly want to, and see it in a way that's not disturbing.
And it's wonderful that the city built that platform to people to stand there and look at it. It's perfectly positioned. So.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Look at that either way. Thanks.
Once you come to a meeting, you have to thank the entire nation.
I told my wife I would call her when I was done and take her to dinner at Hubbard Street, so.
Thank you,
Love you
Paul.
all, but,
Now the Conservancy lands.
Yeah, so I was hoping we can pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago now, with comments, and feedback from our various committees, commissions. We have this document, which is what you had. It's the same document as far as the black text on there, and I basically just added in the red what was discussed at our last meeting. So you have that in front of you in a paper copy. I can keep that on the screen, keep the plan itself on the screen.
Running
I can toggle back and
forth. Think you're gonna need to talk about. I've got to admit, I spent the afternoon rereading over comments, so. My feeling is I hope we can look at the final thing before it goes off the council. There's a lot of confusing.
I have a question for you, Susan, since you were on council and David's not here. Do we have,
I'm not on council.
you were on council.
Yes, I was on.
You were, and I will be, and you will be, so you can answer this too if you wish, but we have alder and alderperson. And, and I understand not having aldermen, I'm agreeing with that. I find alderperson be awkward.
Just call them all.
Alders, please, can we do that?
Yes. Do you have a problem with?
Why would I have a problem with that?
Little things might be something.
Yeah.
I'm apologize.
So, no, I mean, that's valid. I think that falls into a category of general edit that's just like, I don't want to say non-substantive, but it's not really like the core purpose of the document. It's just a regular edit.
Right.
So just to make this go faster, how about when we have a normal, just consistency in language, uniformity edit,
Mhm.
we just agree that if it's proposed, we look around the table, anyone object, move forward. And then if somebody objects, we'll discuss it. So we'll just do that going forward with any sort of
I had a whole bunch of
uniformity in language. Okay.
nitpicky things that I think Evelyn has gotten. Kevin,
I think I forwarded those
And-
yesterday.
and I don't want
this
to get into
morning.
nitpicky formatting crap because
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that
Formatting
that's,
is-
yeah.
that's part of the problem with this document is it was,
Well, it was a word that got turned to PDF, I believe. And whenever you change something to a PDF, things don't look right. I'm very aware of this.
and there's way too much time spent on basic copy editing and not policy. Actually, I've got a few questions about policies that we discussed before. One of which, since I'm chair, I'll go ahead and bring up this conservancy zone, which I'm not totally clear on, but I don't know that we need it here. Rezoning things like Middleton Hills, little areas out of planned urban development into conservancy is, I think, unnecessary.
My stuff in the- Oh, just keep it over.
Yeah,
I might use since you don't. We need to read conservancy areas in Middleton Hill. And urban developments, which they call it.
Well, I will direct you to the beginning of the public lands and conservancy and ordinance language that says what is. And it specifically says regardless of what a property is zoned and what's designated on the official public land map, is what this body has.
Yeah.
Oversight over.
I think I would suggest we stay with that, which makes it way less confusing for citizens. They want to see a map of where the conservancy lands are.
Right.
And they could care less about how it's zoned.
Not,
Sometimes if something gets zoned, people assume things that they shouldn't assume.
Yes.
and so, yeah, I would prefer we
Not do it simply by zoning.
And the lands that are not owned by the city, but are zone conservancy that are adjacent to the conservancy, we don't even need to address until the city owns.
Exactly.
I would say there's some gray area in there, and it's up to this body and the council to determine whether you're going to apply the conservancy lands policies
In that
to
area.
those areas. There is no requirement that conservancy lands be publicly held.
But I think
Yeah.
that most citizens reading this document, seeing something that's
It's
a
very
conservancy,
confusing.
they will think it's open public land and use it as such.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
and I was starting in the discussion to get concerned about my own yard. Which is not public land, and I don't.
But you might want to mimic that same language in the ordinance in the plan to
Yeah,
define what this plan is applicable to.
well, land that's the city. Behind conservancy.
We also haven't burned that area.
Yeah.
Bring this in a while anyway. You would probably know a little bit more if there's any historical precedents for burning that area.
I remember it being burned when. CLC a long time ago. That's. Started 2004.
So where are we on?
That, I don't know if that, Susan, if you had a particular comment that you were directing that discussion
There
to.
is some comments in here. I don't know exactly.
We taking these in order, are we?
Yeah, we should
Well,
probably.
Well, this was one that we had already gone over. Starting,
Yeah.
the new ones will start, but this is one that's gone over that I just. And thinking about it and talking to Kevin. sort of realized, might be overstepping our bounds a little bit and confusing people.
So the motion is to make the report conform to the ordinance, just to.
That we. We don't make a. There's sort of two issues to it. One is for lands that are zoned conservancy but not owned by the city. You don't necessarily put them in this document.
They don't need to be in there, but I think what we would
Or
like
if
is
they're
for a
in there as a
recommendation
Footnote or something.
to find out an inventory of them.
Yes, I think an inventory and maybe a direction of how the city could actually obtain possession of them as conservancy land. But not,
And there is a recommendation in the plan to add to conservancy lands as. Yeah, as opportunity arises, thank you.
I
That
think
might be good enough
that
to
would
say.
be- I think that would take care of it.
Okay.
Charles said motion, are we making motions for each thing? Are we coming to consensus and
Letting them.
and
Yeah,
put them in place?
I was just trying to, yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Fine, that's
Yeah.
fine. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I think coming to consensus probably might be
Yes.
Yeah.
Good
the
enough.
easier thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're gonna
So-
waste a lot of time.
So on the issue of zoning, what was our consensus there? If we found out?
That we don't,
Insofar as they're city owned, we want the recommendation to conform to the ordinance. And
Yeah.
then the second part. That's-
and the second part was, you know, these pieces that we don't,
We try to declare.
that we'll try to acquire.
Yes.
I think that makes it, I mean, when I went back reading over these things, I started getting concerned as a private owner of a piece of conservancy.
Yeah, right.
That it's going to get way too confusing.
Yep.
And imply that the city's taking land from private services.
Is
your land zone?
No. But it is a conservancy in a neighborhood that it was proposed that the conservancy lands get rezoned out of planned urban development. Sort of making it way more complicated than I think it needs to be.
So that, I think we're talking about Middleton Hills, it's zoned PUD, and it would just be what we identify as conservancies that the zoning would change, not the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm not even sure that's necessary.
I'm trying to remember what came out of our maps meeting with.
Yeah, because there's a compelling reason to do that.
How many of these areas are there that are not like, that are confusing like this?
It's mainly Middleton Hills.
Um,
I don't know, some of the newer developments with their similar types of developments.
Up, are you talking about the Bellefontaine Boulevard or
Bellefontaine
Red Tail Ridge?
And Red Tail Ridge,
Okay,
those
yeah.
could be,
Yeah,
and Misty Valley
and
even
Misty,
might
yeah.
too. So. Or is this something that we should not put in this plan, but address separately as an issue going forward? Or put in a recommendation, look into the appropriate zone, because I think there's a lot of little teeny tiny issues that,
Yeah, they won't get into too much minutia in the plan. on
and we
this
don't
stuff.
want minutia in the plan.
So,
Maybe
yeah,
a recommendation is just reevaluate the zoning of conservancy lands. Especially those that are in planned urban developments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not up on all the recent zoning changes, because we started out as a PDD.
well, that's thank you, Measure.
Yeah, so I think, maybe a simple fix would be to, or not a fix, but to identify the current zoning in each of the conservancies.
Yeah, identify the current zoning
And there it's in the table.
so people don't have to reach.
We should have that.
You need that information anyway.
Yeah. So, does that satisfy those questions?
Yes, I think so.
Was there anything else from prior that you wanted to discuss?
Let's go get some other stuff done. I
Well,
went through
okay.
it, looked at lots of.
I'm just looking at this document with the general document notes, and I, up to chapter 1, and I have no issues with these. And I'm wondering if we need any discussion on them.
I'm
Moving some text around.
These are things that
well,
we.
these are the ones that we went over.
But everything in red was already dealt with. So everything was red is already dealt with, so you don't need
It's unresolved.
Unless it says unresolved, yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so I think we can.
So I
think
would say skip to where we left off.
where we left off, I think that we know us deciding to read over the final version before we send them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, everyone? Yes, I. I mean, it's hard to tell how. Yeah, this is a significant rewrite for you.
If you're willing to read it again, I'm happy to submit another draft to that.
I will.
All right, from water resources, proposed changes to classifications from prior plan. In the examples, native vegetation management area should be recommendations, not simply changed. And the recommendation should focus on differences in management practices, goals for the different classification. That came pretty much directly right out of their minutes from the.
That was Lisa's notes. We didn't go into huge detail discussing a lot of those.
This was the first bullet point on the minutes from the Water Resources
Yeah.
Commission.
From what I remember from watching that meeting, they discussed it somewhat extensively, but
Nothing was voted on. It was
Yeah.
just notes from the discussion.
yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Discussed.
Is there like an issue behind it? I mean, like, this seems like kind of a subtle thing
It's
from a change to a recommendation in a plan that
I
has a whole
would
bunch of
say
recommendations.
The big recommendation from talking with Eric is, and this is a very practical one that council probably needs to decide, is who pays for what aspect of maintaining these stormwater features? Because this will be new going forward. And so does Water Resources pay for planting high quality native seeds, which he didn't factor into the funds for the referendum for stormwater? Does CLC pay for it, or,
There are some features that are paid for by Public Works.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Some of it's public works, some of it's, and I think what maybe needs to go into the document is the recommendation, since these two areas are being combined for the two departments to work how we could best handle.
I think that
So-
might be a recommendation.
Yeah, so there's a comment under chapter 9, interface areas for natural vegetation management areas. Indicate which 4 areas have funding allocated for native vegetation management through the SW stormwater. What's the use stand for?
Utility.
Utility,
Yeah.
thank you, rate study, which would be Hidden Oaks, Misty Valley, Spring Hill Basin, the most recently constructed Tribeca basin. And then the next comment says, for areas that do not have funding allocated for native vegetation management through the stormwater utility rate study, which would be Shore Crest Basin, the Lakeview West Detention Basin, Constrictor West Basin, and the Quisling Corners / Gulf Green Basin.
Middleton Hill.
That's which lies immediately east of the Hidden Oak system. Funding of vegetation management should appear as a recommendation to the Water Resources Management Committee, or these areas should be removed from the native vegetation designation. So basically, this is staff comments saying what areas were planned by stormwater to be funded for native vegetation, and those that aren't should appear as a recommendation to do just that to that committee. I think is what.
Well, I think the one that's left out is Middleton Hills, and I think it was the developer who paid for the native vegetation. But that would need to be, there's still be going to need to be dollars going into maintaining it every so often, so.
And so that sounds like a good idea, right? Is there,
Yeah,
from your perspective, is there,
Well, I
is that
think
the right way to go?
I think for these areas that acknowledging what in this case Eric has planned for already, and then looking at what wasn't planned for and just simply saying, hey, we think this should be funded for native vegetation, and that's something that can be directed toward the Water Resources Commission.
That's consistent with their review, right?
Yeah.
Make it a recommendation.
Yeah, because it appears.
That issue just
Good.
counting short on dollars. That's the problem.
So we agree then.
Yeah.
It was to be worked out.
Yeah, so we're skipping way ahead here.
Make sure that.
One more that I remember that I wanted to bring up is it was asked to put a priority on conservancy lands that were adjacent to parks and stormwater. I'm thinking, I'm not sure that it being next to a park really overrides something like talking about earlier, having this unusual wildlife is having eagles and is way more important than next to the detention park. In my view, so I would think we don't need the fact that it's next to a park or a water facility. I don't see it as it's secondary. It's not adding to anything.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, we're telling.
And that was one of Lisa's comments.
I think it was in the scoring.
But yeah, the scoring. I think the things for scoring, my conservation values, like, rare and endangered plants and animals and unique animals, unique geological features, that sort of thing.
I remember reading that, I just don't remember, I'm not seeing it in this document. So I don't know if we
It might not be. I was going back to the oldest comments.
So I wonder, I don't know if maybe it didn't make it into
Might not.
the recommendations from the
Yeah.
committee.
But I think we need to, that's not a big priority on scoring.
Yeah.
It's how unique the area is.
Okay, so here's the comment. The primary focus for master planning should be to where interfaces exist between conservancy, stormwater, potential stormwater features, and city parks. Weigh the factors that capture these heavily. Then we talked about Venn diagram. And what we came up with was no action necessary. So we've already talked about this,
Okay,
and decided on.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We've been typing this up so you remember it better than me.
And I think if we just go in order, we're gonna hit everything, and if we need to go back, we can. you know, if we're jumping around, we're gonna waste a lot of time here.
Yeah,
Let's start with the first.
So we're at proposed changes to classifications from the prior plan. It should be recommendations, not simply.
Okay, so propose, if we have it up.
Evelyn, do you have an idea of how many things we're talking about when we change the classification? And this is, I've got this bookmarked as best I can, so if there's something you want me to hold up on the screen with anyone, I can attempt to do that. If I can get our.
I have too many Excel sheets. Well, let's see, I know for sure. See here. So for the last plan. Comes one. Shorecrest detention pond was considered a conservancy in the previous one. I think that's moved now. Spring Hill detention pond was considered a conservancy in the previous one. For yeah, we Boundary Road Conservancy, but that's not for stormwater management, but that is considered a native vegetation management area. We had some parts of the what called Capitol Ice Arena Conservancy in the previous plan. That kind of just got moved into the Hidden Oaks Conservancy. For Lakeview Park, for the previous plan, some parts of that west, the Lakeview West, are kind of moved into the Conservancy, even though it's stormwater and park. So here it's not part of that. And let's see here. Those are the new ones. And we added things like the mountain bike trails loop area. Let's see, is that one? This one as well. And then up to the inventory system for the native vegetation. So this is in chapter 9 again. I know we're skipping around, but they brought it up. Yeah. So Airport Prairie is one of the native, so here's what we've proposed for this plan. Airport Prairie wasn't included in the previous plan at all. Crown Roof Road, Capitol Ice Center, the Middleton Bike Park. Yep, that's right there. Here we go. Hidden Oaks Detention Basin, the Family Farm Park Stormwater Area, Lake Park East, which is a little section in between Lakeview and Jacobson. Lakeview Park, the Penny Klein Park Berm, Shorecrest, Spring Hill, and Stricker Park, which is the field just to
We'll say, back when I was on Conservancy lands in the past, none of those got discussed.
Yeah, and I think this is an attempt to move those from just being an abandoned, had been planted in natives to something that at least is on, yeah.
So all of these are changes, and so that's of course some.
Yep, so this native vegetation management area is a completely new category.
I see, but
Trying to take into account things that are, again, sort of maybe geographically isolated, or they're very much.
When is that clearly explained in the document that these are actually becoming additions? And the state of these vary considerably in terms of quality of vegetation.
Yes, if you just scroll up, there's a little discussion about that, so. Recognize the need for an additional interface area category. Sites that are native vegetation present. Planting efforts but are not concerns. They're isolated. But the previous, let's see what it's saying. Previous investment in those plans require continued management.
Okay. And some of them, yeah. Like that.
And this was something
And I
that,
think, Jim, you pointed this out, this is kind of just a subtle recommendation that it's a change from just saying that this is moving forward, how we'll handle things, to a recommendation that this should be how we handle it. And maybe that's all we're looking for. And I don't know the exact best way to do that.
What the recommendation would be to who though? To you?
Well, I think there's a, because these areas span different departments, there's a, I think, taking that recommendation from the plan and saying to staff, work together to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And I think that's
All right.
implied, but maybe not.
I
I think, yeah, because that's, I think, where some of the confusion is coming, is,
Go ahead, Charlie.
I was gonna say, it seemed like water resources management wanted it to explicitly be a recommendation instead of an implied recommendation. So maybe we can make the language reflect, this is a recommendation
Yeah.
in
Right.
big, bold,
Yeah.
unavoidable, unambiguous letters.
But just.
Yeah.
Is there a logical place to?
oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, then, I think that's,
I will say just a
Yeah.
little bit of the background on how we came up with this native vegetation management area. So initially, Adaptive gave the city staff a proposed conservancy lands map. And a lot of these places were on, we said, these are native vegetation areas. Some of them are still areas that have that native vegetation. They should be considered conservancies. And then in further discussion, it was like, well, are they actually what we would consider conservancy? Zoned that, again, they're isolated, they've got maybe sort of that degraded quality, so let's think of them as this native vegetation management area. One thing I think is important to note, and that will hopefully go to someplace like council, is that this is additional areas to manage, and then requires more funding.
that probably needs to specifically go in there. Additional, these are additions.
Right, or like, again, kind of going back to one of the other comments, that they need to be planned, the planning needs to happen to keep them maintained,
Right.
that native vegetation. And money already went into them.
And until they're planned, simply mowing them like we have been is probably adequate.
If it's mowed at the right time.
You're right.
Right. But,
Okay,
I mean, this is the reality of council's budget. And,
right, right. But again, yeah, mowing at the right time.
yeah,
all right.
hopefully the city can pull that off.
So the next comment on the list was, Middleton Hills Conservancy, right, wetland unit differentiate between facilities, the outer horseshoe wet basin and the central wet basin, which the horseshoe drains to, are permitted stormwater facilities. The open area lying to the southwest is a regulated wetland. This wetland accepts drainage from the central basin as well as from the storm sewer system along High Road. That marked it unresolved.
Yeah, and that was another comment from Eric. And it might just be enough to indicate in this table those things that he just called out in there. So right now, it simply just says Frank Lloyd White, right, wet marsh.
Yeah.
And that's under
I think
habitat.
Some of it is, I mean, you've got the inner pond, the outer circle, both of those are still stormwater features. Then it overflows into this marsh area that Conservancy lands put the boardwalk through.
So there's a category, stormwater facility, and perhaps it could just spell out what that Frank Lloyd Wright wetland
Yeah.
is. So I see that as maybe just a small addition.
Mhm. And apparently, everyone else is becoming, people are thinking of it as Conservancy. It's a nice square stormwater detention pond with high quality wetland.
Yeah, the management, the vegetation in there,
The
I think,
vegetation is really good.
I think that's a site that could be used as an example of where a stormwater feature has high quality vegetation, and the two things exist.
And they
at
go
the same
together.
place. Yeah.
And they are in terms of what the meaning.
And then next comment, I think also could just be a, insertion in the table for a management, need for that wetland unit.
What's the next?
All right, for River Pond Conservancy, remove the Misty Valley system and the southern half of the adjacent Bellefontaine right-of-way from this conservancy and reclassify these as native vegetation management areas. And this was a comment from Eric. And I think his main concern here is perception by the neighborhood, yeah. And I think he's saying, if the neighbors see it has a conservancy, their expectations are going to be higher than that of it now, which I might argue is not a bad thing. If our goal is to make that a high quality vegetation.
And I will say that that area was listed as conservancy in 2018.
And that's where I think Eric was seeing this as a change, which in our 2018 plan, this, at least the Misty Valley was part
Not
of it.
the
It was the
right of way.
Bellefontaine that,
Yeah.
that was an addition. So perhaps this could be handled similar to the first one we did, where we're talking about having the Bellefontaine right away as a recommendation to Water Resources to invest in native planting in that area.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a compromise or a way to.
I
handle
think
this
that's a
one?
good way to handle it. I will say, back when I was having to attend staff meetings, and we were discussing this, if there was a choice between putting apartment buildings there or doing this, I suggested doing this. It would make the neighbors much happier.
So I think, so for the Misty Valley system, that's where I think I need to make that definitive. Are we gonna keep it as a conservancy? It's been in the 2018 plan. I think the fact that the neighborhood sees it as a conservancy, again, is not necessarily a bad thing. Having just done some vegetation survey for the Graber plan, you know, there is, again, pretty high quality wetlands, at least in the southern part of it. The rest of it could use work. So in some ways, that's kind of saying, well, it's not as high quality. Does that need to be the conservancy area? I think, yeah. So in general, I think treating, having it move towards management that's more consistent with the conservancy would be very beneficial. But then someone has to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's probably the job of this plan to make that recommendation.
It's not necessarily our job to worry about how it gets paid.
Oh, I think it is to
You
some
think it is?
extent our job to worry about whether or not we can pay for it. Because if we expand past if we intentionally try to expand past any reasonable expansion of the Conservancy budget, the only real outcome here is that everything is going to be worse.
I guess
So,
you might have a different view of how much money we have for conservancy lands on capital
Say that
projects.
again.
so my point is that if we expand, if we just expand and expand and expand, but we don't actually focus on our ability to deliver, you know, core maintenance issues and other things, that we're not going to make the system better as a whole. We're going to degrade the quality as a whole.
Expand what?
The land that's designated conservancy in this case, because that's what
It's
it is.
being forced into it with the amount of land that by putting all these stormwater features into Conservancy land, we probably almost at least a third of the land we didn't have before.
And I understand Charles' point of view here, and I think it's pretty reasonable. At the same time, you know, we get all these new things coming on board, and the council, when they approve these things, should recognize that along with this new land has new requirements to maintain these lands and the facilities within them. And if we don't ask for it, we'll never get it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things is we've added significant amount of this for stormwater facilities.
Yeah.
Which Eric didn't plan for when he came up with the budget for the referendum. The reality is he needs to probably recalculate maintenance of those and have another referendum to increase
As long,
fees.
as long as we're clear that this is a recommendation, it satisfies my concern. But if we're just doing it, then I don't think that we're actually helping ourselves.
Well,
I think you're right. It needs to be part of a bigger discussion for budgeting.
but I think there needs to be a realization, because so many of these comments did involve budgeting, but a recognition of the fact that we have added so much land to Conservancy
Yeah.
to be taken care of. And because of that, somebody needs to figure out the financing of it. Is it Conservancy? Is it Public Works, Public Lands? It's up to council. There are multiple ways of doing it. But I think it's very wrong to expect that, okay, we move all this to Conservancy lands and then expect them to take care of it and meet this plan on the budget they've had for the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, it's just, it can't happen.
Public Works hasn't had their road funding go up in over a decade, so you're not,
Yeah, no.
this is not just for a holistic view. This is not the
No, but
only
this is-
committee that has to deal with that
Yeah.
budgetary reality,
Oh,
and that's why I'm
understood.
recommending doing this as a recommendation and not as a black letter implementation.
Well, I think all of this is recommendation.
Can I
Well, it
just,
wasn't super clear.
can I just clarify, are you talking about like the recommendation for the native vegetation management areas, just in
Just-
general, or also?
Well, I thought we'd agreed that it was recommendation for them in general, but this one specifically,
Gotcha,
I'm
okay.
saying, make it. It's its own little comment.
So is it more of a adding an explanation of why we think that Misty Valley, why we recommend that Misty Valley? Because.
Yeah, that would be helpful, probably for the resources management as well.
Yeah, because we're not saying the lands you're talking about should be, the recommendation is they be Conservancy, not that they be native vegetation management areas. Okay?
Right, consistent with 2018.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
their quality.
Yeah. Mhm. For why we recommend it.
I wouldn't be expanding, I'll just saying.
Let's be expanding if there's money and political will.
Well, and if you take out the Bellefontaine Boulevard, that map is the same as what you saw in 2018.
Oh,
And, the Misty Valley, the area to the northeast, is a stormwater facility. It was, to the best of my knowledge, planted originally in native species. And I think when someone purchased a home adjacent to that, it was their expectation that it would be maintained as such. So it's not a situation of a new property that we're proposing management on. It's something that I feel like the promise was made long ago for that.
Right.
But was it
But
made by the
again-
developer or by us?
That's a good question. I think as sometimes these things happen,
And I think one of the things is This gets back to how well public works and public lands in the past interacted. The interactions in the past were pretty between the two.
Also is the residents' expectations have increased greatly over time.
And
Just remember so many developments
from sixties, seventies, et cetera, and land was
donated to the city and nothing was done with it and no one really thought anything about it. And now it's like, oh, you need to take care of all this.
The other thing in the Misty Valley area is these two new developments, Red Tail Ridge and the Viridian one, whatever it's called.
Pleasant Crossing.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Those will, I mean, in one way, this is where we could recommend the developers put those features into these standards. So that they,
For that?
Yeah.
for any new developments in the future, that maybe should be a recommendation. So that the city doesn't have to pay for the initial getting it up to standards.
Yeah.
And some of it, it's going to depend on the developer.
Right, so back to the Misty Valley, what should we do about this data point?
So I think I said that I would add an explanation for why we recommend.
Perfect, I think that works.
Yeah.
And next one, tree conservancies, and this is in the prioritization matrix. Tree conservancies receive points for cultural features. And it says example, Native American sites, Pheasant Branch, Stricter and Tiamat. I think those should just go in the table. If there are cultural feature that's called out, it should just be called out in the table, so we know.
Sure. Yeah, we may want to, if there's a historic cultural feature, we may want to just refer that to landmarks as well. They're developing their own policies for getting things going, so might be a good opportunity for cooperation.
I know I talked with folks who are doing signage, signs for Native American features in the city. I think it was last I talked to them, it was all stalled.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's.
So,
You talk to them?
this one.
Yeah, I don't think we've had anything do landmarks. No, we haven't had anything. So, but it might be useful.
Okay, I'm curious, what are the actual features that Stricker and
I'm gonna have to look back at my notes. That was definitely a taking test.
All right, so we made it through a chapter.
Or habitat?
Habitat. Trail facilities.
That was a hard.
Yes, so this is a comment from Ed Bike Transit. There was a comment in here that said, we don't have any one-way trails, and one of the committee members pointed out that the mountain bike trails are one-way. So you still need to do that. Yeah.
That's still the. Was it the chair?
No, that was not, it was,
Really?
I probably have it here somewhere. It was not the chair. It was Brad.
that's a very valid safety issue.
All right, I think this kind of came as a comment, from their minutes. The question was, does this plan as drafted provide clear marching orders? If not, how can it be improved? Also, it'd be helpful to identify who or which department should act on the recommendations. Are there too many short-term recommendations? Should long-term goals be less than 5 years? Tended to be 5 years. I think that's where this, from that. Minutes, elaborate on recommendations. With that.
I think we do long-term. So even though it's a 5-year plan.
And one thing I think some people misinterpreted about the recommendations table, is at the top it says, some of these are more than just short term, but if you have so many X's on the table, it turns into, like, it's
Yeah, yeah.
meaningful. So it says, so some of these things will need to be long-term things.
Yeah.
You know, you guys can let me know if we can do that table. I think it's a good idea to say, yeah, no, pretty much everything has to be also long-term, but here are some things at least that we can start in the short term.
They're goals we're trying to get to.
One more up. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so an example of that.
Sustained effort is assumed.
Yeah, I feel like this is okay, so I'd be happy to say no. And then they were looking for the Pleasant Branch Conservancy Trailhead project to be highlighted. Could just be a trailhead where Pleasant Branch Creek corridor meets the Century Avenue.
What's that piece of land by Stagecoach?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That was given to us,
Oh,
wasn't it? Didn't Jacob give us that land?
it was negotiated.
It was negotiated.
So I could probably provide details of that project.
I think one of the things I've heard about that project through discussions with folks, I didn't know how official it was, because it seemed like everyone mentioned it during one of the outreach meetings. And then there would be like, oh, well, it's still on the planning basis. So I want to, it'd be great to have you.
I think it's
Where that-
at least a piece of land, that's what it's designated, is designated.
And the county, I think, is redoing bridge. Does this sound right? Public Works?
I think that's been on their list for a while.
The bridge, Century.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be done as part of the Century Avenue, resurfacing. And right now I can't remember where it is in the 5-year street improvement plan, but, we're waiting on the county. It was initially going to be either this year or next year, but the Dade County, who splits the cost with us, and it is a rather substantial cost, decided they wanted to move it back. So,
Yeah, so
And
my understanding is the
was it not-
trailhead would piggyback toward the end of that.
yes, yeah, that,
The bike path will go under it.
that's correct.
So that's like
Cool.
in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's in the next 5 years, assuming it doesn't get pushed back. And I don't really think that there's a way to justify pushing Century Avenue back past 5 years, given the state of the road and the bridge at this point. So, I would assume in the next 5 years for the bike path as well.
I think that's good. All right.
Thank you.
That was the trails chapter.
I will say, just a couple things. I have an updated trails inventory table from you guys. So the trails
27.
inventory, yeah, I think the inventory will change, the trail inventory table will change a little bit. One other thing I want to make sure that I don't think I highlighted a lot, and this was the idea of the maintenance plan for trails. So having like what does Kylie call it?
Dashboard.
Dashboard, or just having a way to evaluate, like actually going through systematically evaluating the trails and then being able to reference that database basically whenever trail maintenance need to come.
I don't know what she calls it, but it's modeled after what the Streets has.
Yes.
So Charles, if Streets has a name for their maintenance plan, it's essentially that, but for trails.
So that will be something I'll make sure to highlight. Right.
We're on the interface areas.
Nine.
Okay, so, include missing the knowledge study data. Did Helen get a hold of you? She indicated she would. Is there an appendix does it say there's an appendix and then there isn't one?
Yes.
Okay, that's probably what it is.
Yep. And I have the study from her. So.
Okay. Reference to Yahara winds data should clarify the stated numbers are for the entire watershed, not the city of Middleton's portion of it.
Okay.
So it's including that as being for the entire watershed, make it confusing.
I think that's the only way they really quantify it.
Yeah, I know it's
Okay.
confusing for the people that are reading our master plan.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think it's the reason I included is just kind of show that it's an effective program.
Okay.
And that kind of gives idea of kind of scale that we're
Mhm.
talking at. I think as long as we're clarifying that it's just the watershed and not the city of Middleton. I think it's more like a hurrah, look at, we're doing something good, right, circle number.
And I think that was the seven.
Was that?
I think that was the,
Assessment, okay.
yeah. Report should also reference pollutant control data for Confluence Pond. Eric always calls it his workhorse.
Yeah.
I think I have some notes from him about that.
Okay, perfect.
Someone getting rid of phosphorus.
In other words, he's getting
Yes.
a lot of reductions out of that. Yeah,
That's my understanding.
Got a lot of phosphorus coming from all those farms.
yeah.
Okay, recommendation number 35 includes this, create ordinances for new developments, stormwater features and percent of impervious surfaces to provide conservancies from, to protect conservancies from runoff impacts. Provide specific changes consistent with state statutes. Current stormwater ordinance does not already address. Suggest these changes for redevelopment as well as new development. So I think this was a comment just to say like, hey, we're already doing a lot of this stuff. That was my understanding of.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I'm, thinking about talking to Eric about like the Bellefontaine development and talking about what percent has to be impervious surfaces. Having that be based on these sort of outdated flood numbers or how much water is actually coming into the area. So perhaps the recommendation should be, I think it's more like try and go above and beyond what state statute, but we can't. Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This, we keep on running into this. We'd love to, but.
So I guess, yeah, is there a way to think about promoting less runoff into conservancies through the city that doesn't rely on state statutes? Or are we pretty locked in to what developers can not get away with, but what developers can put in based on state statutes? And these are
I
things
mean,
I guess I'll know as well.
We can hold them to 2% for stormwater facilities, and if they provide that, then they have their state statute that goes, sorry, over, we're done.
Mhm.
You can't demand anything more. And
Mhm.
the best that we do is we then charge them fees because they didn't do what we said, even though they're meeting state statutes, and we've been able to get away with that so far. And but that doesn't mean that we get to do anything that's effective. Right.
At 2%, David, what,
Of land area.
not very much.
It's not very much, and I don't know who in the state, but then again, there's so many things the state has come up with that I vehemently disagree with, that I would be vested by the federal government.
Mhm. So I guess, thinking more about, so thank you for providing some of that background. So thinking about that recommendation then. Is it sort of a moot point? I want to, it's one of those things we want to push the city to do
Yeah, I think
better.
it's not a new point, but it's also a point of aggravation because
Yeah.
we all know we would like to do more. And having this pointed out in one of our documents that we're not doing as much as we would like to do, but we can't do anything more, doesn't help us.
Would it be used against?
Could be, or citizens.
Citizens will pick up on this and go, you should be doing more. I mean, we get this routinely. And
I think maybe making it clear that what we're really looking for is ways which conform to state law. Because overall, we don't want to get the city sued in a lawsuit that it will lose. And just spelling that out like explicitly, ways that conform to state and county laws and ordinances. Ways where we can.
Throw in federal at the same
Yeah,
time.
I mean, we could, but just to like make it really clear. What we're looking for are ways to fully enforce those. To the extent possible without exposing this to legal liability. And just make it just really clear so that any random citizen reading this who's interested understands these are the constraints, this is reality. I'm sorry if you don't like it, but we have an obligation.
so we're making it really clear that we're doing all that we can, or
Yes, and that there's a way to do more that we will, but we have reality and we don't feel like exposing the city to
lots of constraints.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a way to do it? I mean, ordinance is like the stick. Is there a carrot way to do it? I think
I
about,
think it's just saying we meet local or state and county.
Yeah,
Federal
yeah,
standards.
we don't have a carrot.
Yeah, there,
Yeah, yeah.
it's almost like having,
yeah, so just spell out reality for everybody.
We meet the standards. That's,
And,
yeah.
and if we, but do say, if there is a way that we can fully, better meet the standards while, shielding the city from liability, of course, we'll do that. Or we'd like to do that, but, that legal reality needs to be spelled out for people.
Need to go that far for conservancy stuff, because I see that more as a stormwater issue.
Well. But, I mean, these get intertwined to an extent.
Yeah, they're
And-
intertwined, but
And people reading this, I don't know whether they really follow that, but yes, you certainly in the recommendation can spell out that this is stormwater.
yeah.
So for this number 35, is there a way to change the wording and keep it, or is it something that's just better off being left out?
Well, that's where I'm thinking, just simply state we're meeting the standards and not go any further.
And the recommendations should be continued to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why make the recommendation then? Right, it's,
Mhm.
maybe it is best.
Well,
Or is it-
we'd make the recommendation because interpretations of the state statutes may change over time and allow us in turn to be a little bit more strict. That's why we make the recommendation.
But we make a recommendation that it changes public's perception of what's gonna happen.
I think that if state statute were to change, we'd be jumping all over changes.
Yes.
And it is, I believe, unnecessary.
That we could focus that on explain. And this is the sort of person who gets upset over that they feel that happening is also the sort of person who reads the footnote.
Not sure we need to go that far. I'm reading just the individual citizens, none of them. Focusing.
Could you change that to just fully comply with state and
Yeah.
county,
If that makes it sound like we're not doing it.
Yeah, Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then, you know, follow the law, because that
I
need to
think
be
it
a
would almost,
recommendation.
yeah, I think it almost would have to say that, like, City of Middleton enacts the strongest, protections
Possible.
that they're,
Legally allowed.
yeah, legally
Legally
able to
Strongest possible protection.
continue to do so.
Consistent with,
Continue to,
State, and-
consistent with state
yeah, just
federal law.
continue in the front. And,
Yeah, there we go.
We're good.
So, and I don't know if it's better to have that type of language in there or to,
Well,
I think now I'm convincing myself that there is a way to write it that it wouldn't be totally meaningless.
but, I mean, when it says create ordinances, then that's the part that I'm having a hard time with, because
Yeah.
it sounds like we've not created any ordinances that address these things, and they're there.
We have, but we're also in the process of writing one of them.
Well,
Well-
but they're there.
But
Yeah.
they're there and it will still be there once it's rewritten, so.
Continue to work with people, blah, 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 and just skip the ordinance part.
Yeah, or, yeah,
I think that becomes, moves it from a recommendation just to a note, like part of the
Right.
actual text. of,
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
That's fine.
here's all this
Yeah.
data that we
Yeah.
collected from the.
Yep.
and,
yeah.
I think one thing to think about here is, you know, again, someone brought up this point, it's stormwater versus conservancy. So these are stormwater features in the conservancy.
Right.
You know, are there ways that we can? So, and I think this is part of other recommendations, but the idea that you can do the bare minimum for you can do what's required by the statutes. But then also you can be adding on things about diversity and,
Yes.
maintaining it for diversity.
An example is that stormwater pond at the corner of Mineral Point and the Belt Line. That's the tip of the south end for Pheasant Branch.
Oh, yeah.
That looks horrible. It's simply in a chain link fence and weeds.
Hmm.
And we're going way beyond that for all of our facilities. That's how we need to be thinking of. And all of that stuff brings into the Conservancy.
we were just talking about
Tripod.
Is that mineral,
No.
oh, the one right by Trek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's
just
the-
talking about new parcels that, you know, are created by developers and that kind of dangle out there, right, without a plan. Is this I mean, the ordinance for new developments, is this maybe something that would guide what would
Well, that's what I
happen
was
with the new
suggesting.
vegetation and so
For
forth?
new development, we need, and this would be working, planning a way of, or getting some sort of city requirement that a new developer of like Red Tail Ridge has to put in stormwater features with native landscaping to begin with, so that the city doesn't have to
So
do it.
we would get out of the regulating impervious surfaces because we can, right? You can,
But we
you
want
can
to
regulate what kind of vegetation and so forth to.
Jim, an example was when Middleton Hill was developed, wetland ponds that are stormwater features. They had parties of people going in and spreading native plant seeds in there. The developer did. So it's always looked like that.
Right, and that was part of the
And that was part of,
publicity and the advertisement. for it,
yes, that
right?
was, you know,
I-
they were selling it on maintaining native areas.
One thing that I brought up, I think too, is, so the town of Middleton has an invasive species clause or requirement for their developers where they have to get invasive species surveyed on whatever land they're gonna develop, and then have I think it's a 5-year plan for taking care of those invasive species, and then they have to have a note, a promissory note that holds that the town holds that has funding for taking care of that. So they either say that we're gonna take care of it, and we're gonna devote that money to it, or we're gonna give you money so that the town can take care of it. So
That's a good idea.
that's something,
Sounds like a Richard Overly, Ron Zabella. Like, but.
You weren't aware of that?
Oh, yeah, no, now that she's mentioned this, I recall this now, like,
So
that
that's
was
like,
kind of, that's somewhat recent, but the
I know.
monetary aspect.
yeah, so like that might be, that'd be, I can't remember if must not be in the plan, but I can put that in.
I feel like, well, I know we've talked about it quite a bit. It makes sense as for land that's dedicated to the city. that
Can we
there-
kind of
there's-
morph this recommendation into that?
So at the time of dedication, the land should be
Yeah.
under management.
A plan
The
is
city
funded.
doesn't have
I
to
can't
pay.
believe we don't have it in there somewhere.
I'll take a look, but it can be multiple places. Again, everyone might not read the whole thing. Reading.
Thank you. Also had a hand in that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
right, yeah,
I might help out to talk about that, so.
yeah. Right. Sorry. Thanks for that discussion.
And Mike Anderson.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so direction on this one. What was our final?
So I've got the, I don't know if it's gonna be that recommendation or just have in the text that do things that are consistent with state and federal.
Yep.
We want to try and be able to go above and beyond, and here's one example of how that could happen. This invasive species
Sounds good.
policy.
Okay.
We provide a recommendation on whether
Detritus.
detritus, thank you, should be removed from stormwater detention basins after mowing. I think we have a section on.
Detritus is a harsh word for.
Materials.
Wait, after it's cut off, it's.
Okay.
Or mulch. Or thatch. No, it is thatch.
And we soften it a tiny bit.
Well, and I think we have a.
After it's been mowed.
Practice.
Not before.
But I don't remember where that is, where that mowing best practices, you have a chart.
It's in vegetation, so it's like 8, sorry, that's 7. Chapter 7, vegetation management. Yeah, be around like tables.
There's a basis.
And it's a figure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the main thing about that figure is to
That's timing.
promote mowing at the right time. You have to mow it all. And I guess I don't have a feeling whether it should be removed. Are they moving, do they want us to? They saying that they'd like it to be removed and have it be a recommendation?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
from I was misreading, I was thinking from storm rates and whatnot.
oh, like
That was too.
the trash rack on a,
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
no, it's after mowing. So the issue is there's biomass there. Do you want to get that out so the nutrients aren't?
Right.
And I would worry about it if it were a stand of hybrid cattail.
Yeah.
Usually, we're stuck with feasibility of getting that stuff out. But
Yeah.
ideally, if you're mowing a detention basin, if there's a way of collecting that stuff, but it would be kind of case specific, I think. If you've got, if you've got sparse vegetation,
Can break
it's
down
not
the
as,
nutrients.
I would just leave it.
Thanks about that. But
If
you want
it's-
sweet canary grass too? Do you want to get it out?
I'd love to get,
Yeah.
if you mow canary grass, then
Then
you
you
should
take it out.
burn
Yeah.
it, or, you want it out of there.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So for invasives, it makes sense. For a not super thick native area, maybe it doesn't.
That helps with, okay, I think that could be,
So could that be something that just gets inserted into the, somewhere in that text
Yeah.
near that graphic or something?
Sure.
And that would be something more for a specific plan for area.
it also can't be a,
And we,
I was thinking. I mean, again, like, do they have a machine that can do that?
and some places.
Rake, that's a
Yeah.
machine, right?
It's
It's a simple machine.
Raking.
Yeah.
There are places where leaving the plant
If you want a
material.
rake that's pulled by a machine, not a human.
Yeah, but usually the invasives are thriving in the areas.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
the good native.
Yes, yeah. Usually they also have those strategies for thriving. Lower nutrient areas, so.
Getting rid of the invasive is really the bigger issue. I think maybe making it more invasive species controlled to remove invasive species would make more.
Just to circle back, Century Avenue is 2029.
For
That's
the
questionable.
bridge.
Yeah.
It's within the 5 years.
Yes.
Barely.
All right, that's good.
All right, we talked about these next two. Having a recommendation to water resources to fund vegetation management in these currently unfunded areas.
Or is it even to directive to staff to figure out?
Yeah, I think that's a staff issue.
Yeah, because I think it appears that, like, again, that not being able to communicate on these areas where there's should be joint management has been an issue in the past. And so saying you need to guys, I don't know.
Walk across the building. Keep doing it occasionally.
Well, yeah,
Yeah. It didn't happen in the past.
And then to make recommendations to appropriate councils for.
yeah, and I think this is specific to that rate study. So I don't know if that's a different story here.
Things we said, yeah, we would make the recommendations to do these. Here's a recommendation, because that's all they were asking. for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we're good. This next one seems like a double. We have this already.
Someone mentioned it. We talked about how it's high quality, but we did not talk about if it should be moved out of the community classification.
Is this the pond that's right off, Pheasant Branch Road? Right across from the
The
overlook.
Gaylord Nelson.
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's still a stormwater. pond,
It's a
not like-
stormwater
not a
pond.
Conservancy.
It's a
So,
stormwater pond. There's not even a trickle.
Yeah,
There's an alley.
just luckily
Pheasant
happens to
Branch
have decent vegetation.
Either
Well, it's not luck.
Somebody planted it.
Yeah,
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 a
and
lot of work.
I think.
I meant fortunately.
So, again, it is somewhat isolated from other areas.
Yeah, I could see that one be a good candidate for being called a native vegetation management area.
Yeah,
But I worry that taking it out of the conservancy designation will mean that less resources are used to at least maintain what is currently there instead of say, oh, it's just a native vegetation management area. It's not a conservancy, so we're not worried about it. And I know that, not necessarily you, Kevin, but future.
Well, no, I think you're right. I think it absolutely will. It's like it automatically puts it in a prioritization class aside from everything
I
else.
would say this, we've got, where I live.
Yeah.
I have significant deer damage already this year. Deer moving in. The neighborhood is becoming conservancy in terms of wildlife.
Okay, so what is that?
So I would say keep that as
Make the
conservancy.
conservancy.
You would say keep it conservancy.
Yeah, even though it's a stormwater
Water.
facility,
Yeah.
but it looks like it's across the road.
Mhm. And I think one other part of it is that it was not a conservancy in the 2018 plan. So this is our
Probably not.
adding it
Mhm.
to, based on the vegetation.
Let Plan Commission share harvest here.
I would like for them to.
So,
I'm putting in.
Yeah, and we're doing that for the good part of Misty Valley, so it wouldn't be consistent to do it for this, right?
yeah, so that, again, so doing something similar to Mr. Valley, say, here are the reasons why we recommend it should be
Yeah.
a conservancy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, or
And
even
being
just
right
saying,
across the road is,
That's
that's
not
an added point,
isolated.
yeah, yeah, it's not as.
And it's gonna have all the wildlife from the main conservancy coming over.
I mean, I just think of a place like Stonehill or Shorecrest, and it's like so different.
yeah, those are isolated, smaller parcels.
I mean, Gaylord Nelson, I think, is probably smaller than Spring Valley or Spring Hill.
Yeah,
So and I'm not trying to argue to keep it in native vegetation. I just think that perhaps just, thinking about those as a group, like how do we change those out? It's had been native vegetation and it's been maintained.
yeah. So it's like, I feel like it should be a native vegetation management area.
It's
And it-
started with native vegetation.
It should be like put out as an example of what one should look like perhaps. What one could look like, and I think if we just put it into conservancy and then assume that it's gonna have a higher level of maintenance put toward it or protection to it, I think at some point we have to look at some of those areas where we want to have vegetation in stormwater features that are what we call native vegetation areas, and say like, we need to provide the resources to these things.
Kevin, a practical thing, that area, since it's always been native vegetation, and burning is the best way to control that. Is that less expensive than times a year or whatever?
I don't know if it's less
It wouldn't need to
expensive,
be,
it's.
it wouldn't need to be, it's not burned every year.
The burning does things that mowing won't do. Takes care of it in a way that.
Right.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if this were just treated as the standard old stormwater pond that you had to go in and mow down.
I think it's different. I don't think I've seen it mowed.
No, it has, it has, that's what I'm saying, that if this is a good thing, that I need to have it as conservancy and do like mowing, and that might be cheaper for public works to maintain than them having to go in and mow it all.
But just saying, I guess I'm not following you.
That maintaining it as conservancy is less expensive overall.
Well, I think what we're suggesting is they be maintained the same. The vegetation is maintained the same. It's, yeah, that the way it's managed might not change by changing the designation of it. Might change where the funding's coming from, or who the people on the ground that are maintaining, but I think what we're trying to say is it should be maintained as it is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that it's to our advantage to do it that way, as opposed to if we just abandon it and let public works go in and mow.
Yeah, let
Not
public
what
works
we
take
did.
care of it. Yeah.
What,
No. So proper management of native vegetation management areas should be done regardless of whether it's considered conservancy or vegetation management area.
Right.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
that-
And this
that-
Gaylord Nelson Pond could be a case study of how to do it right.
Mhm.
I think that going back to the Misty Valley, thinking about this, like, it's also like, how do we justify taking Gaylord Nelson putting in native vegetation and then saying Misty Valley, oh, but that's different, that needs to be conservancy. For Misty Valley said, we said we were gonna say, here are recommendations for why it should be a conservancy.
Are you talking about zoning now?
No, just whether or not it's considered a conservancy. Because we know that zoning's not the only thing that dictates us. Conservancy. So it's kind of like,
All Galen Nelson is Conservancy because
You know, but
interesting turtles and other wildlife in it.
I mean, I think their reasons would be, again, the quality of the vegetation, which supports
Native wildlife.
native wildlife, if wildlife is the main goal that you're saying. is
One of the
there's a
things.
conservancy. I guess I just want to make sure that we're not being like saying, oh, Misty Valley should be conservancy. Gaylord Nelson should be native vegetation areas, even though they're both stormwater features, something that kind of applies against other areas as well.
yeah, I guess my worry with what you just said is if we put it in conservancy because the vegetation quality is high, then we're sort of saying that the stuff that we're calling native vegetation, we're saying like, well, that must be low quality vegetation. So
Yeah,
it's not, you know,
yeah, no, I understand.
Okay. And this is, in Misty Valley, is it actually being zoned as conservancy or is it part of the development?
yeah.
Because we've
I don't
got
know.
Middleton Hills.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the zoning really makes a difference.
It's being used as stormwater and conservancy.
When I think about the Misty Valley situation, it seems like there's more land involved. There's more context that is gonna allow for wildlife.
Well, it's connecting
Use,
things.
And it's connected to Graber Pond.
You have,
Yeah.
you have passive recreation happening there. There's a paved
Yeah.
path that goes through
Right.
there.
And the Nelson Pond has nice vegetation on it, but it's pretty much a pond that's right off the side of the road.
It's also a pond where we did have a resident that backed up against it, killed an oak tree that the city had put in. That was a big, huge issue, and we had to go in and decontaminate the soil.
I can see kind of a landscape
Yeah.
context, wildlife, habitat
People
value
there.
being higher in the Misty Valley, justifying that would be part of the argument for that. I can't see it as clearly in the Gaylord Nelson.
And just, I'm gonna double check this, but just in terms of zoning, so the pond parcel for Graber Pond is conservancy. Misty Valley is HUD's S. Yes. And along with the prairie parcel, so northeast of the pond parcel, there is a nice native prairie, and that is not conservancy right now. PUD. But it's not stormwater, well, it does have some stormwater function to it, right? Because it's the PUD.
Is that the part that we walked that was not part of the Ziegler farm, but was the stored prairie coming down to the trail from,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, just to make things more complicated, you can't, for that Graber Pond area, you can't just go by the zoning because of that prairie area.
Yeah.
I apologize, that was probably a tangent we did, but.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I make a request that we have a 5-minute recess?
That's a big request.
Some other.
How long we've been going?
Gaylord Nelson Pond.
Mhm.
Is it a conservancy? Is it a
think what we ended up with is that is natural vegetation management area. And the reason why it is and Misty Valley is not, is that Misty Valley is larger, provides more habitat in general, and provides that contiguous vegetation between the pond, with the pond as well. That's something.
Sounds good.
All right, Herning.
Baylor Nelson is the crown jewel of natural vegetation.
There you go. Oh, yeah.
Make into the plan. Carefully read it.
Current zoning code allows stormwater management only as a conditional use within conservancy zoning. Any proposed changes to zoning should be carefully considered. It should appear as a recommendation to water resources. So that was a concern of Eric's, is that stormwater management purposes are conditional use. So I think we've sort of gone over this already with the zoning discussions where where did we land on proposed changes to zoning, that they would just be recommendations if at all?
Yeah, I think we had a recommendation to reevaluate zoning of conservancy lands, especially those that are in PUD. So I got here. And then to make sure that we add the zoning of each conservancy lands to its table.
I think that satisfies us. Okay, the Public Works Department currently maintains several conservancy areas. These would be South Fork Conservancy, described as everything lying north of Market Street, including South Pond. The Pheasant Branch Ridge Greenway, everything south of the path, including the stormwater basins. Stonefield Greenway, everything east of the Stonefield Road. Confluence Pond, the south side of the pond. Which this report should recognize this difference in the associated limitation. And I feel like a lot of this is called out in the tables, is it not?
Well, it's
So you go to
six.
Well, there is big growing. For public radio.
No, I think that's the point, is that you should be able to look at a conservancy and not know who maintains it, right?
Right.
This kind of goes back to this, the idea of having a mow map, which is, which department mows what. The public works, so like, for example, that's Stonefield Greenway. So east of Stonefield Road. I will say, when we talked to Eric about it, he said he was happy to have us deal with it, or to have Conservancy Lands deal with it.
Which you have to go look at the silver grass there.
Yeah, so the mow map initially would have that little southern section as public work, and then the northern part as conservancy lands or open or public land staff. So I think, what are they actually asking for?
I think they're just asking maybe acknowledgement of
Yeah, I
what
think
the
so.
current condition is. So wondering if it's just something.
Should those be limitations? I read that as like the funding ideas and also just maybe having the management know-how to manage those as native versus.
Well,
just
it,
mow.
yeah, and maybe that's something that needs to be called out is if the idea is that this is a collaborative approach to some of these areas, what needs to happen within public works or the stormwater as far
Okay,
as.
that's exactly what
as,
he's talking about.
Of training and resources.
Training and resources, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So like training and resources to jointly manage.
I think that's,
Cooperatively managed.
yeah, I think that works. On the last page.
Here we are.
Wow.
These big ones there.
Oh, conclusions, oh. Conclusions on the wall.
The first three can be summarized as remove ambiguity.
Yeah, yes.
And it's up to staff to sort it out.
I will say that third one about who or which department. I feel like it's one of those things that just call out when it's not just public lands,
I think that's fair. Yep, yeah, it doesn't have to
because otherwise it's gonna be like.
redundant.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then just make a note of that as the formatting for stylistic choice at the beginning of the report in the executive summary.
Mm.
That way people know when they're reading it, unless otherwise specified.
It is the, yeah.
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 This says public works, this says parks, and this says public works, and this says, pick another city department, but nothing, yeah, but nothing says, nothing says, you know, parks or conservancy lands or,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So who's maintaining all of this other stuff?
Seniors that are in the library.
I was thinking more of the development authority.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Get out there with your pump pack, seniors. Today. Okay.
All right, recommendations should recognize budget constraints as well as ongoing collaboration efforts between different city departments to designate responsibilities for the various areas.
I think that's for city staff to figure out.
Well. I mean, it's like two different things. I mean, recommendations should recognize budget constraints. Yeah, to an extent, but we should also. I mean, recommendations. We want to try to
We
do
don't,
more.
yes, I mean, I'm having trouble with this because it's implying, okay, you don't put forth an idea because the city doesn't have the money for it.
Important to put forth the ideas and yes, it's unfortunate. Things have to get cut, but at least
But it gets,
The city council sees what all is being requested.
and it's, they signed up for this, fools that signed up to be his council, you know, all, they thought.
Way to just look right at me when you said it.
I was.
And I will have to say, these are recommendations from. This was not then the recommendations from, I mean, it has input and everything like that, but here's, you know, here we're taking a look at the Conservancy lands and saying, if you wanted to really be able to maintain or at least move forward the Conservancy lands, here's what you need to do. And then the recommendations are gone through by staff and said, here's what we actually are gonna ask for money for.
yeah,
Yeah, I do think it should make it explicit how we're prioritizing and that this is not a list where everything is priority number one.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, woodworks, we have to do that all the time, very painful.
And maybe in the executive summary, state outright that whereas there's a lot of wants in here, they also recognize that City is limited funds.
Yeah, the Conservancy plans will be recommending over time, because things are going to change. What we recommend in year one could be very different than what we do
Hopefully.
in 5.
Yeah.
Because financing could change.
So I would agree. I think we want to know all the things that are recommendation here, and then a second step would be to make decisions on priority. And
Yeah, and as long as we make it clear that we're not prioritizing all these as like number one must be done. You know, this is the list that we're using to make prioritization decisions off of.
On a yearly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
During
yeah,
budgeting.
and a really bad analogy. You take your car in, and the mechanic tells you all the things that are wrong with it, and you might only have enough money to
Hit the brakes.
fill the gas tank, but
What's gonna make this car not be able to run? Fix that. Everything else waits.
All right.
So I think we have been doing this, recognizing ongoing collaboration efforts.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to some of the things from the previous chapter as well.
Our recommendations must be clearly made to limit unintended consequences, public perception, and potentially future regulatory requirements will be shaped by this plan. This was a concern of Eric's. I think he referenced, let's see. Do you remember what he?
No.
It might be that same one that we had before about the big statues.
Yeah,
Right,
I thought that's what I mean.
Stormwater features.
Who's gonna pay for what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
And I think he was looking at is it the 2006 Ken Psyche plan for Graber, and looking at some of the stuff that came out of there as far as height of discharge for water. And looking at that and saying somehow it got put in this plan and it was therefore that's the way it was gonna be. And I guess I didn't think that something like this had that kind of what would you call it? Like
Directive power.
you know, I see it as like this is the recommendation. And then steps to change the ordinance or steps to change the zoning have to come at a different place.
maybe that's another thing for the executive summary.
Mhm.
You know, this is starting point.
Yeah.
This is not hard and fast.
So
But man,
Planning document.
Yeah,
Right.
and just kind of on that point, because the last bullet on this list has that. I think something related specifically as a call out.
Yeah.
Nearly half of 79 recommendations are categorized as short-term, next 6 months. This is unrealistic. And yeah, it is, and just from if we're already doing this we're doing budgeting for the next 5 years for this, with over half the recommendations as next 6 months, let's maybe figure out which ones of those are actually next 6 months.
right, try to do a little more.
Let's be realistic.
Well, and have some prioritization within
Yeah.
those so that we can space that out a little bit. I mean, this is no different than public works.
Yeah.
We got a lot of crappy roads going on.
So
We're the
is
worst.
so that's something that, let's see, who should be making that decisions on whether it should be short term or not? You know, like we can make our best guesses as the,
The short-term and issue, does it need to be done immediately within the next 6 months, or is it a small project that could be done anytime in this 5 years?
It's the next 6 months, right?
But do all short-term projects have to be done right away?
well, I think another, like you talked about small projects that can be done. Be nice to know that we could get this done in the next 6 months. So even though it's not a priority, we're not gonna push it off until,
So you are coming from a different angle.
that's one way to
Of-
think about it too. So like the next
That's why
one.
there's so many of them,
Yeah,
because
so-
we could do this in 6 months.
Maybe that could be clarified.
Versus, right, we need to do this, first, and that's what you're.
Yeah.
coming from, where you're
Yeah, you know,
coming
like the deer abatement funds have a very hard deadline that needs to happen. But I think if we're using, next 6 months versus
Mhm.
doing it, we should really,
So maybe those, I'm sorry.
the hard and fast deadline ones, there's something seriously wrong. It might be better to just prioritize those, whereas we have short term as
Just call
staff
it
time
short.
arises.
Yeah, short term without a next 6 months.
Because there are some things that are just staff time on there.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
short term as staff time arises, we do that for policy development, and public works all the time. Uh,
Say that in staff time as.
As
doing
staff,
rises.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
But
So
this
can I
this gets
ask
into the 5-year plan too.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do all this in 6 months, but what can we do this year and next year for the planning,
Right.
for the purposes of planning? I just wonder, Kevin, if going on what Charles was saying, if the most immediate things that need to be done in the next 6 months because of funding priorities or limitations or some other reason, if you would be the best one to kind of identify some of those things.
Yeah, I believe so.
what do you want to do the next 6 months?
Yeah, yeah, what needs to be done?
Well,
Kevin, this
and I
is-
think there's some
it's not
summary
gonna
too,
take
like.
79 things.
Okay, well, let's cut it down to 50.
But yeah,
Let's cut it down to
as
12.
Charles pointed out, like this has a very clear application deadline, like between these two times, you have to
Yeah,
fill out this grant application. But something like this provide opportunities. Maybe this is a social media post that goes out and it's like,
Yeah.
but I see this as like an ongoing, something that you're gonna want to be doing the whole 5 years. It's not just a, oh, I
Yeah.
did it, and check it off the list, right? So there's
And that
different
may,
ways of looking at some of these things.
and that may even be something that we offload to the city's communications manager.
Well, and the Parks Department has a,
Yeah.
communications intern.
So, a couple of things that I've been hearing, just to summarize, the idea that this short term, like, what do we mean by short term? There could be a short term high priority because it needs to get done for things to move forward, or there's a deadline. And there's sort of the short term as staff allows.
As staff availability.
So is that, and maybe that's not, even doesn't have the prefix of short term, but it just has a with staff availability?
Yeah, staff implement as staff ability. As staff ability.
so it could be like red flag, high priority.
Yeah.
And then the next one is as staff
Yes,
time is available.
yeah, these are things we'd like to do as staff time becomes available.
Yeah.
And does that change, if, instead of having that timeline, does that change then to the high priority staff available, and then maybe like a third category, it'd be nice to get this done in the next 5 years. One thing I think about, this table is already pretty unwieldy, so thinking about adding another column,
Yeah.
Yeah,
is that information gonna be useful, or just something just?
Just subheadings, right? So the things we need to get done in the next 6 months, and there should be 10 or 12, something like that.
Oh, so
And
you
then
can
the next subheading.
without adding
Next.
columns.
Yeah.
And I think there was a question about the order of the recommendations, just because there's implied implied importance to the first thing on the list or the
Right.
first 10 things on the list.
Can't remember how, can't remember how I ordered them. I know I didn't, there was some, but it's obviously like chapter, I think I tried to
From the
order them
chapter.
by, I think I did try to order them so that anything that was in short term is on the top. But again, if we have so many things that are short term, it's harder to see
Yes,
those.
but if you get those at the
Well, it seems like one other category of things that we should be doing all along, right?
Or that we may
Number
already be
two and
doing.
Number three, yeah, they're already doing, but should
Ongoing.
ongoing, right?
So again, to summarize, we've got our high priority as staff time allows, and then maybe ongoing,
Mhm.
and then, or like, and then long-term 5-year. So that takes us from 3 categories to 4. And then sorting at the table by that and making explicit that here's where we start the high priority things, here's where we start the as staff time allows.
But take out the column and just have it as a heading.
Yeah, I see.
Yes. Yeah. Help the table out a little bit.
So getting rid of those 3 columns, short, medium, long.
Just have a heading.
That will make it much
Yeah.
easier to read.
One of the things that I was trying to make sure was that the city staff can sort this with the Excel sheet that we provide to them. So that's why if you have a column with an X, you can sort by that column.
Could you
Versus having
just
it-
supply that as something extra that goes, you can't,
Yeah, it's been said.
not in the document.
Just a little Excel file for this.
I mean, they can take that and they can add their own stuff and then sort it however they wish.
So that was going to be for the last one.
Yeah, yeah, sorry to jump
No,
on.
that's all right.
I think it's a. So we can.
I think that's the last 3, really,
Yeah.
right? So it's the
Yeah.
5-year plan, it's priorities, which is what I think was meant by that next one. And then be realistic about what you can do in the next 6 months, right?
Well, and back to Eric's concerns, do we have a way of wording those? Yeah, I'm not sure what to do with that one.
Which one?
Recommendations must be clearly made to limit unintended consequences.
That's a general,
Yeah, we intend to limit unintended.
that's for every document in the world.
Yeah.
ever written, and everyone that will be written.
Exactly.
I think it's through. And I think they've.
You spell check too, so.
Yeah. Okay. One thing, okay. So for then going to that 5-year capital budget, 5-year plan for capital budget projects. I think one thing that I think that we can use this again for those high priority SMLs on a lot of those capital projects come out of master plans.
Yeah, and that's where we're starting to get into what this plan is not intended to do.
Right, because I feel like I could save some capital projects, but if we get a master plan done for something in year 3 of this plan, that's gonna
Mhm.
change the capital request for year 4.
I think it's expectations, it's this plan doing more than it's supposed to.
Right.
So if that's okay, then I would say.
Just right.
Yeah, I think that's something that staff and more importantly, this committee can
That's what we
go
do.
through the budgeting process and make determinations from our prioritization matrix where we are with master plans.
And of course, we could also have a 1,000-year flood next year.
Yeah.
No. But I.
Please no. But yeah, just to make it easy for people, let's, in the executive summary, spell out what this isn't as well.
Right.
And that way,
Yeah, it's not a budget document.
Right.
it will be used, it will be consulted in the development of future budgets. However, this is not a budget document. And that way, it's okay, I saw it in the executive summary. I know what it is now. I'm not expecting a $50 million budget request from CNC.
So we through all of them.
Through all the feedback from our requested committees and commissions.
When we looked at this before, I apologize for jumping backwards here. We talked about this definition. Recreational land. Defines passive outdoor recreation as recreational land uses which involve passive recreational activities such as arboretums, natural areas, wildlife areas, hiking trails, etc. It
That's the definition from
from
plan, but it's
From-
it
from the-
goes somewhere else, right?
from the ordinances.
From the ordinance.
And I mean, I understand why you took it, but it still sucks. And I'm just wondering if we can have a shorter, sweeter and better definition.
We can, and then I will say, but here's what's also in the ordinance, because I think this has come up a couple times of being able to say what is conservancy thing, like. You can say whatever you want about what the passive recreation is, but here's what legally, or what, like, according to the city, is passive recreation.
Oh, okay, just maybe, yes, before you state that, have a short definition of your own, and then say, according to the city ordinance.
This is.
But I worry about making my own definition.
All right, you won me over. But man, we gotta get that ordinance changed.
Just cite yourself as around zero.
I
Version of what we have.
I was just going to make a kind of obnoxious request. Can we have a definitions section?
So we would include conservancy, passive recreation,
Yeah.
and other things that you're thinking about.
Yeah, just.
You try this.
Would you have all the acronyms in there too?
So not a glossary, but
But yeah, it would probably be helpful for us. if We did have a definition section. Just some of the things are, pretty simple, but some of them maybe not so much. And, are we defining wildlife as stray cats? Probably not, but.
I will push back and say, if you have specific things that weren't defined, I think different, because again,
Yeah.
from my perspective,
Let me make it.
where do we draw the line then? So if there are recommendations from this,
How are we
Community
defining
about-
accessibility? In this.
That one's almost impossible.
But we're using it to make decisions, and that's the thing, like, if we're using a word to make decisions in this plan, we should probably have a clear agreed upon understanding of what the word is.
About accessibility for a specific group, and that would be enough to define it.
well, I worry,
Go ahead, you worry.
oh no, I worry that, again, we're getting into a little of the minutia then, again, where are we gonna stop our definitions? So if there are specific things, like, I've gotten feedback from you at this point. I don't know, but I haven't necessarily gotten written feedback from other individuals about what definitions they might want to have. So, I think we could start making a list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we start making a list. You bring us back a version to look at, hopefully at the next meeting. If we want definitions, we could make a list. To give you, that could be added on.
I worry, I don't want to draw this out too much. So.
Well, I think we do need to see it.
Yeah,
Before we
but
send it
she
to
doesn't
council.
want to make too many unnecessary changes.
Well, I'm not
Add a
suggesting.
block of definitions
Yeah,
at that point.
I'd love to get to the point where we can say, this is the feedback that we reviewed, here's the items that we would like changed or added, we've got through this whole list. I think it's great to see the document, but then I don't want another round of.
No, I don't want us to do another round either.
So I guess question one, do we want definitions?
I think
I think we probably benefit from a definition section for the words that are use, yeah, I'm just looking at this similar to when we did the zoning code rewrite. And having all of our terms defined there really did help tighten some things up. But if people don't want to do a definition section, I'm not gonna die on that hill. I just think it would be helpful.
I agree. Or someone to draw this out too much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, your point is from the point of view of a decision maker. And maybe it's up, I mean, that's more on us than it is on the consultant who's writing the plan.
I guess another thing to think, way of thinking about it too is again, what the public will take from it, right? And that's kind of why you want to have the definition. So if someone says, well, you saying here that you need to have accessibility for the conservancies, you can say, well, this is how we define accessibility in the plan. And what you're talking about is outside that definition.
Yeah. And so, and a lot of these definitions will actually just be going to the relevant ordinance or the relevant part of the code or the relevant part of the comprehensive plan and defining that, or the relevant city policy document and taking that definition. And that way it's there, it's clear, it's immediately intelligible, and if someone disagrees with it, they can write to their alder and say, change this policy. I don't like it. And that way, we're at least having a conversation about the policy as it fits within the plan instead of why does this word mean what it means?
So I think here's what we can do. So I don't know what the rules are for making decisions via email, but is it okay to send a group email starting a list? Here are the definitions people want to see. And then having it be.
I think for
for
expediency, yeah, we should do that.
So I'm not sure if we have things issued for there or not.
This is editing.
So if, I think the way to do it would be everyone email Kevin the words and terms you want to find. Kevin maintains the list.
Okay, but could we start out with Kevin or someone generating
The base, yeah.
and then
We add to that.
and then that
Kevin gives that one. And
Yeah,
Your base can be accessibility, passive, and.
Yeah, so far I only have nothing from here, but just what came out, so.
do it with the acronyms.
that's in the definitions.
we should probably,
And then if we have the acronyms and definitions, we don't need to spell them out in the text.
yes, that's correct.
That would seem, I mean, to me, that seems like an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
If you start anywhere, you can go back and go, what's this mean?
What's worm suck?
I mean, oh, wait, we don't use that term.
And I think I would request that that list be generated by next week.
Yes.
Wait, so would each person have like a set amount of pages they could cover and just like put the terms and we would just look at someone know?
So I think you just look through it and you add to the list as you think necessary.
Just read about acronyms, right?
I think some understanding about acronym parts. If that means that like the like committees and things like
Yeah.
that. I'm still gonna spell it out in the text the first time it's mentioned.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, yeah, I guess they just also see this as something that someone's gonna flip to some area and they're gonna see something and they're gonna go,
Oh, yeah, and then they could go to the abbreviation.
and then they go to,
Yeah.
to the definitions and say, oh, this is what it says.
That's good. So I know we've gone through here, we've got our definitions. We got public feedback. We have feedback from Lisa Gennaro that's beyond what was then recommended by the water resource.
That was incorporated into this.
But some of the things that she had weren't necessarily then recommended by committees, was it? Or did you put everything from her?
I took what her recommendations were, because I felt like the water resources said, hey, we agree with this stuff and we're gonna add to it.
But she also added, she sent more,
Oh.
right?
Oh,
So she
she-
sent additional, she said, I went through it because I'm putting it in my newsletter. Here's additional comments.
Okay.
Then we had the public comments. So how do we address those? And some of those public comments are by people who are very invested in this plan and have read it. So I understand that we don't necessarily have to, it sounds like we don't necessarily have to respond to those specifically in an appendix. But some of them are pretty,
Yeah, but they get an email.
They could, so should they appear in, should the unedited comments appear in an appendix?
no, it's,
No.
do I have to respond?
Do you have to respond?
I don't
Because,
think you have to respond to them,
No,
okay,
No.
but I mean, I guess,
Look through and see if there's any good ideas and.
yeah.
yeah.
The Misty Valley, volunteer items, if they don't appear.
And I think that was addressed in one of our comments.
yeah, okay. So that's great, because I want to make sure that so for the record, I'm gonna look through the public comments, see which ones are relevant, seem like good ideas. Include those. And if not, I have the blessing of you guys to ignore things.
I mean,
And same goes for the committee. If these are attached to the agenda, if you go through here and there's something that you see that's,
And then for those things like Lisa Gennaro's comments that have been submitted after the deadline. Like, how do we deal with it? Not on the committee?
I think it's a public comment.
He submitted them with committee.
But it's not because she has the ability to reach people that the public otherwise, like the period is closed. Right?
Yeah,
And it's not just to pick on her, it's just in general, what would we do with comments?
there is a
from-
deadline.
yeah, so there was a clearly spelled out deadline on the website with the plan. I think, I feel like with the comments that we have as part of this, like we have the majority of it. Just I think at some point we have to cut it off.
Yeah,
I guess I would say read your comments and review them, but in a slightly different light because they were late.
Mhm.
And again, if something just like, wow, that's phenomenal
Yeah, why not
idea.
take it, right, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, we spend months and months and months, doing this. We've already spent months and months.
and she's had multiple opportunities, as plan commission, water resources.
And
Where we've had
I also understand that
So-
every time you reread something. you find
Yeah.
something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, at some point you just, it is what it is. It's imperfect, but it's.
Next time.
Yep,
I do think that we should send this to water resources.
Once we have a final draft, though, they had one comments and maintenance comments and,
I mean, to staff.
no, I mean, to staff and. So for another. I don't think
Burning
so.
off, and
Yeah.
throwing it down another whole month.
It's already getting put off another 4 months from this point. There's a chance we get it to them.
See, they meet before we do.
Yeah,
They meet the week before we do, so we need to see it before it would go anywhere, and that would put it off another whole month.
at this point.
well,
Well, there's every other committee too that.
can we
Yeah.
make it, we have to, I understand your point. Let me agree with it. I understand your
Yeah.
point, but could we send them the unapproved new draft?
Yeah, I think we could, and it would just be, here are the revisions that we attempted to satisfy your concerns as you expressed them.
Please understand that
Yeah.
the committee has not reviewed these and approved these.
But, I feel like this is an important document in that we can say we took these however many
Why don't we send them
comments
that?
from our various committees, and these are the actions that we took on them in response. So,
That was,
because council is gonna ask that question, like, you went in front of all these committees. They gave you feedback, what are you doing about it? maybe this is our answer right here.
Yeah, and just as long as they get a chance to say, yes, you looked at our feedback, we agree with what you took out of it, or no, this wasn't right.
And if they say no, then
Then, that's what's gonna go before council, but they've at least weighed in and said, this is what we meant, or this is what we didn't meant. You did listen to us, you didn't listen to us.
So does it have to go out every committee then? I had looked at it before.
Well, I mean, I guess, my other thought is, everybody has the opportunity to look at this before council votes on it, and they can send the feedback
Yeah,
to whomever
yeah,
and say, we looked at this, we made these recommendations, they said pound sand, and we still say you need to take action. And give that to whomever and let them chew on it.
yeah. I think most of water resources is fine with what we have.
Yes. You can't speak for everybody, but
I just want to make sure that they have a chance to weigh in again on
So
the budget and on the budgetary matters specifically.
This budget's sort of,
separate, please.
yeah. That comes up when we send stuff to council to get funded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, make a motion, have a vote, I'll vote against it, and, it'll be purely on the basis of, I want WRMC to have a chance to weigh in on these things, and that's fine.
All right, we'll see.
The person that goes to WRNC,
Let's see, I'm trying to craft a book in my head here.
yes.
That
practically
that Evelyn take the recommendations as discussed and maybe they incorporate them for Kevin to create a base of terms to be defined, to be sent out to the commission members to review and potentially add to those definitions that may be incorporated into the new draft, which Evelyn will present to us at our next meeting. Did I catch everything?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Okay, and absent reviews by, secondary reviews by other committees.
make it additional, well, I guess secondary is right.
Additional,
No, well, I want it to be clear that this is, they've already had a chance to look at it and
right, they've had the review, and then an additional review.
second.
any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1.
And we reach the end of our notice agenda.
Yes. So do we have a motion to